All right. I think people should see my screen at this point in time. See if I can pull the chat up real quick as well while people are trickling in. Chat. Awesome. Okay, we've got chat. We've got people. Can someone post in the chat just to make sure? Can you see my screen okay with the Quarto All the Things? Awesome. Thank you, Florian. So welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us, whether you are in the morning, afternoon, or evening. We have a lot of ground to cover, so I don't want to delay. We'll jump right in. Just a little bit of kind of pseudo housekeeping as well. I'm going to try while I'm talking to keep my eye on the meeting chat, and likewise for the other instructors. Given the varied audience, this is going to be kind of a lecture only workshop. However, we will have all the materials in a GitHub repository or repositories for you to go and play afterwards. And so hopefully that will, if there are any questions or otherwise, just feel free to post in the chat. I'll keep an eye and we'll see what we can do to talk about. We anticipate potentially at least 3 core audience member types present today. Those that are new to kind of the concept of technical writing and literate programming, Quarto, R Markdown, or otherwise. Those that are using R Markdown today already. And those that are already using Quarto. And because of this variety, this makes this type of workshop very interesting to teach, especially when you kind of don't even really have an attendee list jumping into it. So we're going to try to cover ground for everyone. What that's going to mean, though, is there's going to be some portions that may be a little slow for you, and there are some portions that you might feel a little bit overwhelmed as we go a little bit deeper, especially later on into some of the technical nitty-gritty. That's okay. As Harvey mentioned, the workshop is recorded, so you can always go back and watch. But hopefully, regardless of where you're coming from, you should get something out of this. How we're going to approach this is we've kind of done the introduction. I'm going to kick this off with kind of a abbreviated intro to Quarto that caters pretty much to at the beginning to those kind of first 2 audience types, those that have used R Markdown or those new to Quarto. A couple tips and tricks woven in for people that are already using Quarto. But then we're going to go a bit deeper. Mutaz is going to take over, and he's going to cover a kind of end-to-end Quarto-based workflow for technical report writing, focused around generating PDF-style reports. So this is going to involve a lot of LaTeX. And how Quarto and LaTeX kind of can be woven together to generate very rich, high-quality reporting. We're going to have a little break, and then I'm going to come in and talk about Quarto extensions and filters with the lens of some of the challenges that Quarto can help us address around some of the multilingual goals that many people that have tried Quarto or Markdown before might have kind of hit. In particular, this construct of being able to make reports in not only PDF, but also HTML or docx, and taking advantage of some of the normalization opportunities you have to bring the level of quality that you might get through LaTeX elsewhere. And then finally, we're going to close out with Priyanka, and she's going to showcase some stuff about Quarto projects and profiles, as well as some of the cutting edge functionality that Quarto has been working on in collaboration with the Shiny team, particularly around Shiny Live. So this is the overarching overview. These times are a bit fluid, so we might go over a little bit in a section or under a little bit in a section, but this is approximate. So if there's a section that you are particularly interested in or not terribly interested in, this should hopefully give you a general sense of the timings to tune in. These times are all in Eastern Standard Time, by the way. So who am I? I'm Devin. I am the Chief Technology and Product Officer at A2AI. I formerly was at Posit as a Principal Solutions Engineer focused in the pharma space. My background, my PhD, was in pharmacometrics. And so, however, even in graduate school, I got bit by the technology bug and have spent more and more time pivoting towards how to enable scientists with technology. And through my time, both in graduate school and since then, this construct of being able to use literate programming, that idea of weaving together your prose, your kind of report information with the underlying code to enhance reproducibility and traceability, has always been a very exciting topic. And so when Quarto was kind of formally unveiled a couple of years ago, this was something that was super exciting to me. This is something that at A2AI, which is a new company that started earlier this year, we have been ourselves drinking the Quarto Kool-Aid, so to speak. We are a consultancy of about 50 people at this point in time, primarily focused on clinical pharmacology and pharmacometrics modeling and simulation and drug development support. And we do all of our work that touches reporting in Quarto. So this is something that we truly are attempting to practice what we preach. And so some of the things that I'll be talking about today are also recognizing the fact that there are challenges. This is something that I am very strongly supportive of, but it is would be unfair to say everything is kind of rainbows and unicorns everywhere. That said, this is something that A2AI is ourselves kind of invested in figuring out how to navigate, both from a kind of business process and collaboration perspective, but also from a tooling perspective. And so some of the things that I'll be talking about later on about like extension authoring and otherwise, this is something that we are starting to push out into the open. So if this is something that you're exploring as well in your company and you're interested in collaborating, please reach out. I have my GitHub and my email here. I would love to hear about what you're doing, especially if you have any interest in collaborating and developing some of these things out in the open. We would love to do so. And so with that, let's jump into Quarto. So Quarto itself, if you go to the Quarto website, it has a very nice summary about what and why you might be interested in Quarto. Quarto is this open source tool chain that allows you to do technical writing, in which you not only can do the technical writing, but if you want to, you can also weave in these runtime engines of various languages to be able to create documents where any code that is executed can be natively kind of woven together with the output document. This is something that has been around for about a decade, or the concept has been around before then, but one of the things that was brought to kind of the forefront with R is this construct of R Markdown. And so R Markdown paved the way and championed this concept of using these kind of notebook style interfaces where you have chunks of code and chunks of prose interwoven together. Over time, R Markdown began to grow from a single document setup to more and more complicated kind of layouts where you were actually able to build like websites or more technical reports that spanned multiple documents. And throughout that, the tool chain figured out how to accomplish those objectives, often by bolting various components on top of R Markdown or reaching out to them. So for example, you could build very nice looking websites using R Markdown. However, under the hood, the kind of magic using like this package bookdown was R Markdown actually cohabitating with this completely other toolchain called Hugo that was a kind of Go-based static site generator. And so what Quarto has brought to the table is the fact that it has centralized and consolidated how you can do all of these activities, whether you're trying to build a website or a report or a blog, a book, presentations, or a variety of other outputs that you might be interested in. There's kind of this one tool chain to rule them all. And if that is something that makes you a little bit nervous about saying, well, if it's one tool chain, then how flexible can it really be, and how can it cover all those cases? Hopefully that is an answer that we can address a bit throughout the course of this workshop. In addition, though you may have tried other languages with R Markdown, like using Python or shelling out in various chunks to other languages like Bash or otherwise, what was actually happening behind the hood is everything was still orchestrated through R. So if you were going to use Python, it was actually kind of translating through this R bridge through the reticulate package to be able to execute those Python chunks. Quarto has been able to escape that because of it's a brand new tool chain to be able to represent the Python and Julia and other communities natively by actually having this kind of language agnostic wrapping engine that the Quarto toolchain provides, so that these other languages beyond R also become these first-class citizens and are able to take advantage of language-specific functionality within them. So for those of you that are interested in kind of content, that will definitely be the focus of this. We'll be using R as the focus point for this workshop. However, a lot of the principles and the things that we're talking about right now are also something that would apply if you primarily use Python or Julia or otherwise. Now, to frame this a little bit and to understand a little bit of the stages of what's going on so you can have a decent mental model to start to appreciate what Quarto is bringing to the table beyond what I just mentioned about it really not just being our Markdown kind of 2.0, but rather a reimagining and a reimplementation of how this works. Fundamentally, when we think about how R works with the historic R Markdown flow, you started with this R Markdown document that had these code chunks. Those chunks of code were extracted by this package knitter. The code was run and the outputs were kind of replaced, and ultimately a Markdown document was created. This Markdown document was then fed to a separate tool chain called Pandoc. So Pandoc is the Swiss Army knife that R Markdown and now Quarto sits on top of. It is a very sophisticated tool chain that if you go to the pandoc.org website, you can see is actually this kind of universal translator of document formats. So you can take one document format, you go through Pandoc, and theoretically out the other side, you get another document format. And so while Pandoc itself can do this somewhat universal translation, or at least to an extent, this ecosystem has kind of focused on getting to Markdown and then giving Markdown to Pandoc. Pandoc takes that Markdown and then can output this as LaTeX or HTML or docx. And so fundamentally, one of the challenges, though, is Markdown was never really designed for sophisticated layouts or sophisticated functionality. It was meant purposefully to be a very simple kind of language DSL for people to be able to write in and to be able to kind of translate. And so some of the things that you might want to do for like a website or a more technical report just were not feasible to even express in any way, shape, or form in Markdown itself. And so this is where Pandoc itself and Quarto sitting on top of Pandoc have really made huge strides. So not only is this tool chain more agnostic to R, but when the content gets to Markdown, when it's going into Pandoc, one of the big things that Quarto has now brought to the table is this concept of being able to natively weave in what are called filters. So the idea of what Pandoc does is the way that it becomes this universal translator is it takes your content and it generalizes it into what's called an abstract syntax tree. And so this is basically a tree structure that, if you can imagine, that has nodes that represent your content. So for example, if you have, if you think of a content, you'll have paragraphs, and inside of paragraphs, you'll have words. Those words might also have wrapping information about them. So, it might be bolded or italicized. All of that information is translated into this abstract syntax tree that represents both the kind of textual information as well as configuration or what type it is. Is it as a header, or is it a paragraph, or is it a sentence or otherwise? And then Pandoc allows you to manipulate that tree before it ultimately translates it out to the kind of final output document. And that tree manipulation is what gives Quarto a lot of its superpowers, this ability to go in and say, we can now start to teach ways to kind of express in pseudosyntax, different layouts that kind of go beyond what Markdown itself can express. But also you can add a lot of functionality that Quarto itself has implemented in what are called these Lua filters that are passed to Pandoc that allows it to do a ton of stuff. And if this is something that you're struggling to kind of mentally connect with at the moment, that's okay. This is very much something where a demo is worth 1,000 words. And so I'm going to spend the majority of the time from here actually kind of in live demo mode to demonstrate how all of this fits together and what this ultimately means to you as you're interacting with Quarto. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my share briefly, and I am going to start it back up where I can open up our studio. All right. Share. Portion of screen. All right. So at this point in time, people should see a 2023 R in Pharma kind of workshop, RStudio workbench or kind of project. Let me pull up the Zoom chat again to make sure if things come up, I can find it. Okay. And so this is a project. You can make a project by kind of going to File, New, Quarto Project. And so once you're in a project, this idea of us being able to use Quarto documents, which are ultimately represented as QMD files. And so I can just have our example documents here. So the idea that we can show here is for those of you that have truly never actually seen Quarto or Markdown in the wild, when I was mentioning this construct of a code chunk and kind of prose between, this is what I mean. So what you can see here is you have this document. This document has headers. These are represented in Markdown via kind of these hashes. You have regular content, you can have hyperlinks, you can do things like bold text, and then ultimately you can have your code chunk all in one place that when it's rendered out is going to make you a nice document. And so our goal here is to kind of build up a document and showcase some of the capabilities that Quarto really brings to the table, and connect that back a little bit to what you might have used in R Markdown previously. So if you've used our Markdown, this concept of a notebook with code chunks should feel very familiar. And in fact, it looks identical when we get going. And for if you have a simple R Markdown document, just renaming it to a .qmd file, so it's picked up by Workbench or VS Code or otherwise as a Quarto document should most likely actually work out of the box just fine. However, by adding this Quarto document, we're going to start to get some more stuff that is not necessarily present in our Markdown. So I now have added a code chunk. I've added some libraries. And so I can also kind of type some information like, you know, this is the top of the document. And then I'm going to start to express what I want to do. So we want to kind of look at some data. We want to visualize this data, and we want to kind of go through this report flow. So I'm going to save this document real quick as example and say, first, let's take a look at the data set. So I'll move this up a little bit. If people could post in the chat real quick, is this font size okay for people? Should I make it a little bit larger? Looks okay. Awesome. Great. All right. So if I say, let's look at the data set, I can do like a little preview of the data set. We're going to use the inbuilt Theophylline data set. Since everyone has it, you can use it whenever you want. So I have this data set. It's in a code chunk in our studio. It's going to preview as this nice kind of table for you. At any point in time, if I want to look at this, I can just click render. And the default rendering output is going to be HTML because it can kind of preview right in line here. And we're going to see this document turned into an HTML representation of this document. And so if we take a look at it, we see like the title, top of the document, the code chunk, which actually Quarto by default will make nicely copyable if you want that, outputs, like the fact that it has actually printed all of this content out, my text again, other information. Now you also see the output of this table here, which, you know, the first thing we might notice is, well, it previews really nicely as this kind of overall table here. Here, it actually looks more like what you'd get kind of printed out in your console. And the reason for this is because that by default, what Quarto is going to kind of do is represent as close to what you're asking it to do. And so there's some kind of magic that goes on behind the scenes in our studio to make these previews for you. This magic is not necessarily present when it gets rendered. And so what we're going to do to make this actually look nice is we're going to use the GT package, which is a package that Posit has been developing for a number of years that allows you to target different outputs, HTML or Word or PDF. And so if we add GT to the mix, we click render again, what we're going to see now is actually we get a nicely laid out HTML table. Now, with this table, we can also do the same thing for figures. And so if I have a table, now I can say, let's also look at a concentration time profile. And we can say our theof and pipe that to ggplot time, y is conc, and we'll just add our points. So now we have a plot that shows up. By the way, the way that my plot is kind of popping up like this magically is I'm using the keyboard shortcut on Mac, Command-Shift-Enter, which runs the whole code chunk. You can also click like the little green arrow to run it at any point in time. So we have a plot, we have a table, and we're also going to be good reproducible scientists, and we're going to add some session information on the bottom of this document, so that when this gets rendered, we have information about what was done. So if I save this, if I render it again, we're going to get to this kind of document that has our libraries, our plot, our table, our session info. And so this is something that if you were doing this, if we were doing this in our Markdown, at this point in time, this flow is identical. So let's start bringing some Quartoification into the mix. The first thing that we might want to do is to say, if this was a document giving that you wanted to give to someone else that you didn't necessarily want to show the code itself, you just wanted them to see the outputs, what we can do is we can come up here, and this is where we have our first introduction to this concept of what's called the YAML header, where you have metadata that you can put in that controls the behavior of the document. And so if I come in here and I say, there is a format called execute, what you're actually seeing here as I type this is one of the first things that Quarto starts to differentiate itself from our Markdown with respect to the Quarto tool chain actually gives you and brings to the table auto completion of a lot of these things. So one of the things that you might rip your hair out a little bit with our Markdown is kind of remembering syntax. This is something that Quarto has made your life as a developer easier. So I could say execute, and in this case, I want to say echo, where it says include the cell source code, and I'm going to say false. And so when I do that and I re-render this, what we're going to see is that suddenly all of my code chunks have disappeared. Now, when I say all the code chunks have disappeared, this still probably isn't what you were hoping for directly with respect to the code chunks have disappeared, but there's still some output here that might not be necessarily the pros that you want to showcase out anywhere. In this case, there's this kind of printed out information for you about like the packages that the tidyverse package is using and loading. And so we want to get rid of that. And so if we look in the execute kind of chunk everywhere, we can also do things like warning, false. Now, what this would do is this would set warnings for all code chunks, just like saying for all code chunks, do echo false. And so now the entire document would say if there were ever warnings printed out anywhere, suppress them, hide them from that final output. So you can put things here. But if you're ever in a situation where you want to scope what you're doing, and so in this case, I say, maybe I want those warnings to pop up for some other areas, not the entire document. I also have the option in these chunks to control the behavior of those chunks. So in our Markdown, you might have done this inside these brackets here. So you would have said something like warning, false. But what we're going to do here, and we're going to come in and we're going to say, what Quarto looks at is it looks for the comment syntax and then a pipe. This is saying this is a kind of Quarto recognized comment. And so now if I start type warning, you're going to see the same options start to pop up here. So I can say warning false here. And this is actually going to allow us to suppress warnings. You can also do things like suppress messages. And you're going to notice here that this syntax here is also YAML syntax. So when I render this, we're going to see now that I've suppressed this from this chunk, and we're starting to get a document that just looks like the kind of output that you might want to communicate around. Let's see, looking at the questions real quick. I'm not sure what the question execute doesn't work with message false. It should. Maybe if you can elaborate on that, I might be able to answer that. All right. So we have a document. We've started to introduce a little bit of these Quarto differences relative to our Markdown, where we can start to actually put these comments in code chunks. The reason for this is because this is now language agnostic. If I was using Python, I can use the exact same syntax with Python comments to be able to make these settings. So this YAML is kind of universal rather than it being kind of our specific syntax. And so the next thing that I want to be able to show here is the fact that though we have this figure and table, what we would really like to be able to do is start to add more context about these that you would see in a report. And so what we're going to do is we're going to also do a little bit more flavoring for this. Question in the chat was, what is the shortcut to add those keyboard shortcuts? If you do here and you say Command Option I, Control Option I on Windows, it automatically inserts those code chunks for you as we're typing. So I want to add a caption to this. And I also want to be able to talk about this figure elsewhere in the document. So what we can do is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say fig.caption. And we're going to say that, and this is a, concentration time plot for the off. In addition, we're going to add a label. And in Quarto, this is very important, and is one of the gotchas that people run into, is when you do these labels for figures, they need to be prefixed with fig dash, and for tables, TBL for table dash. If you don't do that, what I'm about to show you will not work. So this is one of the kind of things that you should check if you're ever trying to do this yourself and saying, hey, what he showed me is not seemingly working for me. Make sure you have this prefix. So we're going to say fig conc time. Now, by adding this, if I were to reference that value, this thing, elsewhere in the document, like here, I could say, the as shown in at fig conc time, we see some interesting insights. Now, if I render this, you're now going to see that this shows up as figure 1. And if I add another figure, it's going to show up as figure 2. et cetera, et cetera. I also made a spelling mistake here. This is supposed to be fig dash cap, not fig caption. So try this again. There we go. Figure 1, concentration time plot for Theof, and then this reference here that is actually hyperlinked as well. So we have this label, we have this figure caption, and so we're able to kind of reference this in other places in the document. This is something that there were some workarounds to do this in our Markdown, but something that Quarto supports natively and kind of magically to make your life easy. Now, when I say make your life easy, to me, one of the things about making my life easy is that when you get more complexity in your document, the toolchain helps you. And so you can see right here, I typed this, I had just copied and pasted it, but as the number of these kind of cross-references starts to increase, remembering or not making kind of syntax mistakes or otherwise becomes more challenging. And so this is a good opportunity for me to also show one of the other things that Quarto has kind of brought to the table, integrated both in VS Code and in RStudio, which is the visual editor mode. And so the visual editor mode makes this notebook experience a little bit more approachable for people that are getting started or used to that what you see is what you get style of writing. So instead of needing to kind of translate that markdown into what it would look like, this is actually going to give you the kind of what the rendered output is going to look like much more closely. So if I make, for example, a big header, pound, and then you can see now it's showing heading 2, heading 2. And so this is something that you can see kind of shows you what you get. Now, not only is can this be nice when you're writing a lot of prose, but if we actually look at what happens here, if I now type the @ symbol, you actually see that Quarto has kept track of what are the cross-references that have been generated in this document. And so it actually knows about this, and it's giving me this option for code completion. So if I type this, I click it, and code completion is there. So this is something that can help prevent if you have 50 figures or something floating around and you're trying to reference them, something that you can let the tool chain help you. Question from the chat, does this work across documents? If you use the construct of a Quarto book, where you can have multiple documents together, this referencing does work across all of the documents in that book. This is not constrained to just a single document. So for now, I'm going to switch back to source mode. And what I want to show next is if we use in kind of the pharmacometric space, a lot of times when you make a plot, you might have to display this plot for regulators in kind of different shapes and formats. In particular, one common thing to do is to show it in kind of the normal axes as well as a semi-log plot. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, like, this is going to be my concentration time plot. What I'm also going to add to this now is I'm going to do this plus scale y log 10. So now I have my first plot that I actually have to make sure I run the code. I have my first plot, and I'm also going to have my second plot. Now, if I render this right now, kind of pull this up here, what you're going to see is you're going to see, the first plot and the second plot. Now, you're going to also see something else. You're going to see this question mark suddenly, this question like, where is fig conc time? I can't find it anymore. And the reason for this is that Quarto, when it has multiple plots, is going to automatically increment the numbers of them. So this label that we provide is more of like a starting point. And so actually what we need is like fig conc time 1. And, we also have a semi-log representation in fig conc time 2. So if we render this, again, we will see figure 1 and figure 2, and they're appropriately referenced. And what do you mean when you ask, can the label be customized dynamically? So while you're responding to that, now we have these figures are shown here. They are, like this, but sometimes you might actually want to look at those figures side by side. And so again, this is where Quarto starts to give you a set of tools that did not exist previously in our Markdown without doing something like physically needing to do that yourself, reaching out to a package like cowplot or something where you are going to actually jam those two ggplots into kind of one figure where you stick them in as subplots, and you have to manage that yourself. Not so with Quarto, though. With Quarto, it becomes as simple as saying layout and call to. And so if we add this and we say we want the layout to now be 2 columns instead of that 1, when we render this, and I refresh this, let me see if I might need to pop this out for the layout. Why? Let me re-render it again. View. Okay, pull this over so you all can see it. This is what the resultant HTML looks like. It's because it's kind of compressed on the screen. It's kind of automatically reflowing a little bit. See, notice here, if I make it really small, it automatically reflows because it's HTML, so you're not really seeing it completely. But if I pull this entire browser window open, you actually see that these plots are now side by side. And this is something that is not just for HTML, but this will apply for Word documents or PDFs. And so if I come here and I do Quarto render example.qmd 2 equals PDF to actually get a PDF representation of this output, let it run through and open up this example, you will see that these are side by side. Tom is asking, can you customize the captions and label names for each of these plots? I'm not sure about the label names, but the captions come from, you have fig cap, and you also have fig subcap. Caption for figure 1, caption for figure or sub. So with these, if we render this now and we look, we see that we have the captions with the subfigures as well. So this becomes your global caption and then your subcaptions as well, if you want that. Now, this is also something that is kind of happening in Quarto. There, of course, like it is also something that, many of the plotting packages themselves have addressed this. So for some people, this might not be as big of a deal because you might be, using like GG subtitle or the like, or GG title to handle some of this behavior. But for example, for us, we have our scientists doing some of the work, but we also have a medical writing team that is using Quarto where they want control over the ability to customize these captions. And so by doing that, by not baking them into a figure that's kind of passed over statically, you give a lot more flexibility for the team to be able to customize these things. I really want to quickly pull up do a time check on myself to make sure that we have enough time for all of the sections. Okay, so I have a couple more things that I want to show. And so, all right. So you have the ability to control the plot layouts here like this. However, you actually have even more sophisticated control. For example, let's say we wanted to have a summary table and a plot side by side with one another, you can do that as well. And so what I'm going to do, just purely for the sake of time, I'm going to not type this out live, but rather copy and paste into this document. So if you had this, if I paste in real quick an example here. So now what I've done is I've taken that concentration time plot, and I have this here. I also have now a table here of the Cmaxes by subject. And so what we have is when we have these two code chunks, I've added an extra piece. This is a Quarto/Pandoc specific bit of syntax called a div, D-I-V, div. So this div is a block structure that allows Quarto to lay out or control kind of what the layout structure looks like. And there's some functionality that you can add right here. In this case, you can say layout, and you can do things like just say 1, 1, 1, which says give equal spacing to both this plot and this table. And so if I were to render this and pull this up, you now see this is all reflowing. But yeah, if I make it wide enough, you see now this plot and this figure are side by side. You can also then control this behavior even further by going in and saying, like, if I wanted this layout instead to be more like 70% of the structure was the figure and 30% of it was the table, you can do that. You can make entire grids with this. So if you actually had, if you wanted to have like 2 things on the top and then 1 wider thing on the bottom, it becomes a syntax that looks like this, where you say like, this is my first row, and then my next row after that, I want it to be the whole thing. If I had a third chunk here that had some output, or if I wanted to reference a figure directly. Quarto can do a ton. For the sake of time, again, this, we could have an entire workshop talking about this type of thing. But this is a good kind of segue for me to bring over to the Quarto website to demonstrate the things that I'm talking about here are not kind of hidden knowledge that you have to discover completely on your own. The Quarto website is pretty comprehensive. It does not cover everything, but it does a good job of exposing you to a lot of what Quarto is capable of. So using this figure example, what we can see here is we see this idea of being able to just like add in a figure, how you might control things like width or referencing it or aligning it, and then things like the additional layout opportunities that you have either using this type of syntax or the panels like I was mentioning, if we scroll down a little bit further, where you can actually do this layout. So this is stuff that by going through the Quarto website, you can find. My strong bit of encouragement to you all is the Quarto website has an enormous amount of stuff going on in it. If you kind of go to the getting started section even, or the guide, excuse me, you can see just how much stuff that they cover. Instead of trying to go through and, recognize every single thing in every single section, dabble, go through it. Things that you find, look for exposure where you can see and say, I didn't realize that was a thing that Quarto could do. I'm going to go look through here and see what is possible. And so when you get to a real world scenario that you're needing to apply some of these things, you can go back to the website and say, I kind of remember it talked about this a bit. Now let me go think about that particular bit of context. And so the website is super helpful for really starting to dip your toes much further into the capabilities of Quarto. At this point in time, I am going to open up for a couple questions real quick. If anybody has some in the meeting chat. I do have some more content that we may come back to that showcases some of the bits of Quarto. But again, the stuff that we're talking about here, things like the ability to add variables into your document. So you can start to generate these templatized reports that can be output. Like there's a ton of stuff that Quarto can do to improve your efficiency. And some of these Mutaz is going to be showcasing. And so I want to make sure that he has a ton of time to show you this report writing flow. He'll be touching on some of these things. And then afterwards, if we have time willing, I might come back to a couple other fun things that you can do with Quarto before we get to the next section. Question, apart from the Quarto website, is there another comprehensive resource you recommend? I still recommend the Quarto website as kind of by far the most comprehensive resource, because the other thing that is on the website are things like the gallery. This gallery is going to showcase a whole bunch of examples of things built with Quarto. So I guess it's not technically the website, but this has been an area that I myself have learned a ton by going and looking at what other people have kind of explored around to do. This Quarto website itself is unsurprisingly written in Quarto. So if you ever want to actually look at Quarto itself, you can go to quarto-web on GitHub and actually look at how the site was built. This is a pretty complicated site, and so it shows a ton of things that Quarto is capable of doing. And so is for those of you that are kind of further along in your Quarto journey, definitely take a look. Now, if you're just starting and you're kind of like interested to build your first website, don't go to the Quarto website as your first starting point, because it does a ton of stuff. And so, start with some of these simpler galleries. Now, the other place that is super helpful is if we go to Quarto and we go to the discussions section. This is another area that is a resource with a kind of a different lens, where there's a lot of question and answering going on about how to do things. And so I think if you go to the website and something is not apparent, before you start like generally Googling, I would go directly to the discussion section, and like you might just type in some figure if you're working with figures, and then you can see a whole bunch of examples of like, alignment of figure captions. Sometimes when I have a spare moment here or there, I might go look at some of these, just again for that kind of like exposure / inspiration to say, this was a problem that I'm not having now, but I want to file this away in the back of my brain that someone's had it, someone's been talking about it, and there are some solutions being discussed. So when I get there, I can kind of stumble back here to find it again. Sam, question, our Markdown doesn't always knit consistent formatting in Word. Does Quarto do a better job? Kind of. That is something that I'll be getting into in part 3 of this workshop on writing extensions, and we're going to talk a little bit more around the challenges of working with Word. Okay. So with that, while we switch over screens, we'll also do kind of a 2-minute break, if you will. So if you need to get up and stretch your legs or take a quick bio break, while I stop my share and hand it over to Mutaz, he will start in a couple minutes. Material already out there for presentations. Now, if you have particular questions, feel free to reach out to us if that's something that you don't want to ask in the public sphere just yet. But we did decide for at least this kind of abbreviated workshop that we were not going to cover presentations. All right, and with that, hand it over to Mutaz, and I will be back for round 3 after he's done.
Thank you, Devin. That was very didactic and fun, I guess. So in my turn, I want to talk about the Quarto tips, how we can create reports that we can share it in our, if you are working in a company, university, or otherwise, like how we can create reports, we share those reports as well and customize it in a way that could be less painful than historically known. So before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Mutaz. I work at Gilead Sciences as pharmacometrician in the pharmacometrics group. That's part of clinical pharmacology. I work on creating report and also the pharmacometrics activities. You can see my email here. Please feel free to reach out and my GitHub account. So if you have any question or if you want to chat, here's like my contact information, please reach out. So to appreciate what Quarto and Pandoc do under the hood, let's look at how LaTeX works to generate PDF. LaTeX or TeX is very complicated program. It was written initially, or the initial program was called TeX, that's written by Donald Knuth, and that's like the vision for Donald was to for literal programming and how we can write notebooks and contain codes in it so it can be reproducible and easy to follow the information. So if we look here, that if we have a hello.tex, that's a tex file, and that's the LaTeX structure of it, very basic structure that contains something called document class that we will talk a bit about it. And we have the document or the body of the file. This will goes into either the engine of something called TeX or LaTeX that will go through a series of compilation and rendering till you reach the PDF. While it's been developed, there's other tools that came up with. It's called Lua, LaTeX, or PDF TeX. Those also made things easier to at least to step into a point that we can take a detour and go to the PDF itself. And there's the other tools here, LaTeX, LaTeX, and PDF LaTeX that also can convert to PDF with a high quality. Now, LaTeX can be a bit painful, especially if you have your graphics, you have bibliography, glossaries, all of that. You need to run LaTeX multiple times, so you can set all things together, because at each iteration LaTeX runs, it can create a file that is needed for the second iteration or the third iteration, so you can have the whole document in your hand. That's where Quarto come in handy, that it give us, at least it will make life easier here in terms of you don't really worry about what goes under the hood in terms of LaTeX engines. So let's start looking at here. If we have a QMD file or a Quarto file that we call it hello, and it's very simple that in the YAML, we have only, the format is PDF. And the body here, we call it hello.r in Pharma. What Quarto, then if we render this into Quarto, it's going to create some files in between. So the first thing is Quarto will be, or QMD file will be converted to a markdown file, and then this markdown file will go through pandoc, which will convert the markdown into LaTeX file. And the LaTeX file is so large because it does have so much defaults inside it, and that's what we will get into in a bit. After that, the Quarto engine will try to render all these LaTeX. You don't have to worry about how much it renders, because it will keep rendering it until it gets it right. So we will have at least the final product as this. Hello, R in Pharma. So this is the PDF version that we will get into it, and we will see how these workflow and how we can create a report. So let me switch the screen here and move to the RStudio. So let's start by just creating this simple Quarto document. And in this document, I'm just going to select PDF here and create. So we can see here we have the just the basic structure where we have a title and a format, and all this template or the default that comes with the empty Quarto document. If you render this, like let's save it and just render it like, let's call it hello QMD, and then render this Quarto document. You can see here it's rendering, and it's run 2 times so far, and it gave us the final output here. It's just a simple one. If we look at the files, Quarto will delete or clean all the files after you generated them. We can request that to keep, like, for example, we want to look at what is the LaTeX default for this PDF file. So we can request that by adding here in the header PDF, like just put it aside because we're going to list over for the PDF and list over it. And we can say keep TeX true, because it does have a true or false, and the default is false. It doesn't create that, or it doesn't keep it. So it's gonna be clean it out and wipe it after the PDF is generated. So if we render this again, you can see here we have the hello.tex file. Now it's very long. If you can see, it's very long document that have a lot of functionalities, a lot of defaults that you don't really have to worry about it. That's what to be created when you render Quarto into PDF. We can see there we do have the document class. I mentioned in the basic LaTeX file, you have a document class and the body. The document class can control what you want in terms of it's an article, report, book. It's different macros, so you can customize your report, your paper, your letter. It's been used for different stuff, and even like you can even create your own document class. But since this is not a LaTeX workshop, we're gonna focus on what can Quarto give us in terms of document classes and other functionality. You can also see there's a packages. In LaTeX, you can use packages that these packages contain functions that you can use in your documents as well. These packages can be referring to creating symbols, creating some visualization, or modifying your geometries. It does have a lot of functionality, and LaTeX packages are there's thousands or 100,000 of them out there. Okay, so we got introduced on what the LaTeX default function here, or how the LaTeX default file here. Now let's start looking at a report. So I'm going to create another QMD file, and let's go to QMD and let's call it your report, or let's call it RN Pharma. And again, I want it as a PDF, and let's create that. I don't want this. Let's remove this so we can start fresh. And let's save it as a report. Okay. The first thing we want to look at is the document class, which is we talked about there's a different document class in LaTeX, but I want Quarto to know there's a document. I want different document class than the one is default. So you can do the same where you can put the PDF, nest the PDF here, and add some variables into the PDF. If you write down document and tap it, it's gonna tap it and give you the suggestions for this. Now, the built-in, or at least the default for Quarto, is something called ComaScript, which is very customizable package in or subclasses in LaTeX that it's easier to customize than the standard one. And you know the ComaScript by looking at their initials start with SCR. Those SCR are all related to the ComaScript. Or if you look, if you want, no, I want the standard one, you can see it like article, book, report. Those are the standard one. But for this workshop, we will not focus on the whatever Quarto provide as a default, and I'm gonna go with the SCR report here. Now let's render it. Like we looked at the document class. I just want to render it, see how that looks like. And see, like when we render a report, it will give us an empty page that does contain the title of it. If we add a few headings, like a top headings, for example, summary, and that's something usually you see in a report, and introduction. Let's save this and render again. So again, we can look at, we can see that there is the cover page or the title page that contain the title, and it contains every header at separate pages. Why is that? Like, how about I don't want them in a separate pages, I want them all in the same pages. So this is where the document class comes in. Every document class do have its own functionality that Quarto will recognize and give the will recognize that you are requesting this document class. That's why when it converts it to Pandoc and then to LaTeX, it knows that, yes, I want to use this document class created based on that. For example, if we added, like, if we use the default, which is the, if we use the default, like if I remove all this and render this, and this is going to give us the comma article based. The comma article, you're going to see it's all going to be on the same page. But since we are focusing today on reports, I'm going to stay with the SCR report. Document class, and we can select the report here, and we render it. The thing is here that in every report, we see there's a table of contents, right? And that's something very important in reports, where if you have 500 pages reports or 200, it's really good to have a table of content that refer to each section of it. And that can be easily requested. Also in this PDF list, we can start typing TOC, which referring to table of content. And you can see there's different types, but if it takes true or false, the default is false, but we want to select it as a true. If we render this, it should give us table of contents. That is also, if I say click on it, it's hyperlinked. That if you click on it, it should take you to the page that you're referring to. Let's take a moment and create figures. Figure that I want to see how the figure will look like if I can cross-reference it and how that will appear in the table of contents. So if we just request, like, created the packages here, and let's say I want a figure with the label, label it fig, cons, and the fig caption is, let's call it concentration time profile. We're going to use the same data set that Devin did, which is using the ggplot for, sorry. I'm going to here use, just request the packages and request library. I'm going to request a tidyverse since it will contain all these information I want. Let's just beat ourselves up and get the GT as well. So if we do this, and let's create the figure now. I don't want to run anything locally. I just want to render everything together. So again, we can do, oops, sorry. Which is label. Now let's label it again, label. And this is, we use always the, if it's a figure, we use the fig prefix. If it's a table, it's table prefix. And for section, we will cover that in a bit. So we say figure concentration, and the label for that, we can have figure caption, which is concentration time profile. And then we plot it as ggplot, plot Offline with time and concentration. And just like, let's point using the geometry of points. So if we render this now, save it, render it. . So we can see this is the table of contents. This is the artifacts that we can suppress, as Devin mentioned, with the warning. We will get into that. And here we go. We can see there's the figure, and we do have the label for it. And in the same way, we can also reference it. So, and the summary, we can look at the concentration here. And let's also suppress the warning here. I don't want those, and render. We can just to make sure that everything works with PDF as well in terms of the summary, and we have the figure here, and it goes back to the figure. But again, in table of contents, we are not looking at where is table list of figures or list of tables as well. So let's, before we add those, let's add another table here that will give us a table, so we can label it, because I want to show you how these GT tables looks in PDF. So we call table, we call it as well concentration, and table caption. So table caption, concentration for the first individual. So we can say here Thayaf, and then we filter subject equal 1, and we pipe it again. This is the native pipe I'm using here, and we can call GT. So again, you remember how the GT looks like in terms of when you run it as a HTML, and let's look at it, how can it looks like when we are rendering in PDF. So you can see here, like it's running the LaTeX 2 times again. And if we look at the tables here, you can see the table here, but I don't like it like this. I can make a space here. And in this term, since I'm talking more about LaTeX, it is valid to use LaTeX function or macros inside the Quarto document. So if I'm using, for example, clear double page, this clear double page can you can render, and it will make a space between the table and the figure. So you can see here, we can look at the table in a different in a new page, and how that table looks really fine on when it's rendered to PDF, because under the hood, this is going to be converted to a table environment in LaTeX, and that's how we can render this. Again, let's go back and look at table of contents, where I want list of figures and list of tables. So we can go back to the YAML header here. In the same way we added table of content, we can add table of list of figure, LOF, stands for LOF, and you can see there's a true or false. When you hit tab, the default is false, and I wanted the true. Same way, list of tables, and I wanted it true as well. So save, render, and the same, like it's iterative process. We keep adding chunks and chunks, and you can see. So we have the table of contents here. We have the list of figures and list of tables, and each one, it's hyperlinked, that if you click on it, it will take you to each of those like assigned labels for them. Like, for example, if it's a figures, it's going to go into the figure. If it's a table, it's going to go into the table as well. There's also list of listings, or if you have theorem or otherwise, like if you look, as Devin showed in the Quarto documentation, there's a bunch of functionality in reports, especially for listings, that you can access and see what could be a functionality. Now, how about if I want to look at change. I don't want it to, for example, like a table of contents. Some companies, or they do have like a criteria that this should be called something else, not table of contents or table of figure or list of figures or list of table. This Quarto can also give us this functionality, so can easily change this. If we go here and we add title, sorry, a table of content title, and you can see it here. The title is used for the table of contents, and I'm going to change it to content. And we render. Just I want to look at how this will look like. And we can see it change from table of contents to contents. For list of figures and tables, it's not the same way, because here we need to request a specific package from LaTeX to do it. But Quarto do have the built-in functionality to do that for you. So in the same pattern, but before we say the list of table title, there is something called crossref. This crossref, it's a package that can also, at least Quarto will recognize it as well and do that for you. So if we say list of figure title, we can call it, instead of list of figures, we can call it figures. And list of table title, it can be called tables. And if we render, let's look how this will look like. And yeah, we do have the contents here. We do have the figures as well, and we have tables. So it was changed from list of figures to figures, list of tables to tables. The other thing, let's go back now to, if we are staying in this same arena, let's look about if I want to, we talked about like how we can cross-reference a figure that if in a text, like if we go to summary here and we are cross-referencing the figure as one here, that's referring to the figure. How about in those big documents, I want to reference a section instead. So for example, I want to reference the summary and the introduction here. So let's say in introduction, I want to reference, and then reference the summary section. So in Quarto, how you can do it is you start by curly brackets, the pound sign, and the prefix section. So you have the prefix section and you say summary. You can then use it down there by using @sec summary. Let's render this and look at it. So we can see in the introduction want to reference section, but it's not hyper-referenced, or there's no number for that section. And this should be like, why it's not doing what I requested to do. So this is the thing with Quarto. Like if, especially for the section and referencing, you need to request additional stuff in the YAML header here, where you can request the number section, number sections and number section headings. So we want it to be true. And if we render this, and if we look at here, if we keep looking at this one here, so now we do have that. And if we click on it, we go back to the summary. So we will have all this cross-referencing, not only for figure or table, but also for the sections we want in our file. So far, what we learned out is that we can change the document class from either it's going to be a report, there's an article, you saw there's like different classes that you can use, how we can add table of contents, how we can add list of figures, list of table, and change the titles of these ones. And also we can clear out like at least cross-referencing figures, tables as well, and then cross-referencing, but the same, you can follow the same thing here. Okay, I have that. So also the additional thing, like for example, I want to show here before we get into customization, like section 1, I don't want it like to appear like this. You can do that and change that. Like for example, if you put closing brackets and call it sec dot, and you can do it like this and close it in curly brackets. If we render this, how this will look like. So you can see, you can customize this, and if you have a word that you want to put it here, you can put the word for it. Like for example, if it's a chapter, if it's a particular place that you want to reference, you can just customize what you want here and add the citation that, or the cross reference here, that will bring you to the that section. So if I click one, I'm going to go back to the summary here and do all this cross-referencing in a way. So we talked about now about this cross-referencing. How about now we talk about how we can cite, which is very important. And we can take a pause after that and let everything sinks in. So again, Devin shows that our studio do have a nice ability, especially the visual editor, and that's where you can really insert, have a good functionality there, and very powerful. So for example, let's say in the introduction, I want to cite base our package. So you do want to cite our packages. If you look at the toolbars here, you can see insert. If you click on the insert here, there's a citation option. If we click on this, it gives us really a good functionality different. Like if you have a pip file, we will look at the pip file, how the structure of pip file in a bit, but how we can like get into, or at least get a publication, or you want to cite something. So you can either, if you have the DOI, search for that, and cross-referencing data site, PubMed as well, especially in pharma, you use PubMed a lot. You can like just search the keywords or the title of the paper, you can get the citation. But for the ease and for the time, I'm just going to use a built-in R package here. So I'm going to use the base, select the base function here and click insert. If we look at the files here, we can see that the reference.pip is auto-generated. If we click on this, we can see this is the piptech structure, that this is an article. This is the keyword for the article, and this is used in the citation and some of those functionality, at least like the metadata for title, author, the year, and the date, and the URL for that. So just for ease, I'm just going to delete this for a bit because there's no first author here, but I'm just going to keep it the R core team. But like when you deal with more references, you will see how these, like if you have multiple authors, then they are comma separated as well. Okay. Now, let's go back here, and we can see that the citation is being added here as a base. It's same way citation, but if we look at the bibliography now, that's also automatically added. That yes, you can look at the bibliography and look for a file called references.pip. Now, again, let's go back to the source because it's easier to see, and let's render. I do have a question again from the, where's the insert? Yeah, let me show you again. So we go to the visual mode here in our studio. You click on the visual mode. You go where you want to cite. For example, here, You click here, and there's insert. You can see the table or toolbox here, insert, and there is the citation option. If you click on this citation option, you can see all that, or how you can insert citation. Okay. We did render this report. Let me render it again. Sorry, I'm not sure what I didn't save, but yeah, let's render this. And if we scroll down where we want, like in the introduction, I want to reference section 1, I want to cite our package. And here we have the citation for that one. But if you look, that it doesn't look nice here. I don't want it to be like just below this citation. I want it in a very like a particular section which called references, right? That's what we used to see where the references end. So we can create another header called references. Sorry if there's any typos here, but that's okay. And then we insert the div. Devin talked about the div functionality of Quarto Markdown, and you start with the 3 columns. You added the curly brackets, bound, and you write down refs, and just close it with three columns as well. So this will, at least now Quarto will know that, yeah, I'm gonna dump all references down there, or at least I'm gonna tell Pandoc and tell LaTeX that's where you wanna print the bibliography. So if we render this again, and you can see I want to cite the base R package, and the references are being here. Just one, like there's different types of references as well. There's different types of styles for references, and that's also, you can modify that if you say biblio style. And there's like I'm gonna share let me see if I do have it here, references. So yeah, I took this from Overleaf, which is very LaTeX driven community. If we paste this and go, so you can see those different types of citation styles that you can select, and you can add to your Quarto document. For example, I'm gonna use for I don't know, author year. Yeah, I'm gonna use the author year implementation here. So let's put this back again here, and I can say author year, and save it and render. Yes, you can have multiple reference, and you can have multiple reference files as well. Is that how I understand it? I don't know if, like, for example, if you want to reference the first one and reference the second one, I didn't test it before, so I can look at it offline and get back to you if you drop your email. So again, we do have, like, I want to cite the R package here, and team, like we have it here. It's like, because it's probably it's the default, so you can have it here, and then you will have the references here. I think it's just, let's pause here and recap what we did. I can also look at the question, answer what I can have. So what we created so far, we created the PDF report in Quarto. We used the document class that is specific for report. We added section numbers so we can cross-reference in sections. It's also important to add table of content, list of figures, list of table to all to these report, and we did. Also, it's not only we added them, we can also change the titles of those figures. It's called either contents, figures, or tables for the title of list of figures and list of tables. And we show how to add bibliography. And even like if we go back to the we want to add more citation to this reference to bib, like what RStudio will do in the visual mode will keep appending to that reference.pip. If you have an external one that you want to use, you can also use it here and add it instead of the reference.pip. We can also look at, there's like a biblio style and a different biblio style here. Let's see if there's any question here. Clady, I don't know, probably Devin, do you know?
No, so in this case, what that colon div within the slash rest, that's actually a special kind of magical term that Quarto itself is going to look for. So this is coming back to my comment around the kind of some of the magic that Quarto is doing in collaboration with Pandoc. It's collecting all of that information, and then it's looking to say, do you have that colon refs thing? So it's not and what's called an H1 that, you know, pound references. It's actually physically, it needs to be a div to understand, please put our references there.
Yeah. And for example, because we are using PipTech as the main citation method, there is also something called natpip, and that by default will throw everything at the end of the document and give you a reference for that. So if we look like what's the citation method, there's as well, like if we can call it cite, and we can look at cite method here, and cite method will have three options here. This is the default, this is I'm using here, but you can also use natpip or citeproc. I'm not familiar with citeproc, but I'm familiar with both of those. And LaTeX is a well-known citation method. I know natpip would be more customizable for people who look for a specific customization of references. So yeah, this is like usually this is the overall how the citation or bibliography works in Quarto, and you can see here it's generating bibliography. So again, let's go back on how LaTeX do stuff. It will run once, runs to collect all the information. Then since it will create this bibliography file, that there's another program in the Tech Live or Tiny Tech distribution, it's called Piper, that will deal with the bibliotic files, and then it will give it back to LaTeX so you can render it again and get the all information at the end that is all collected together. Okay, so yeah, we did the recap. Now let's move into another thing here, and let's call it, how about if, for example, I want to add packages from LaTeX, because here we are talking about like all the defaults, but how about if this one of the packages I want to use is not a default? How can I do that, or what would be the easiest way? For example, if I want to add, we have the report here, I just want to add a header, right? A header and footer for that report. So I'm just gonna copy first, like what we can do. Sorry, before I'm gonna copy and save time, we're gonna write down include, and after include here, you will have different options. You can include it before the body, include it after the body, or include it in header. So let me show you how that will look like. Like if, for example, I have a big file, it's called document class, and you start begin document. This is just a simple LaTeX file, and you have an document. And here you have the body. The body here, whatever you write in the report inside after the YAML file, everything will considered a body. So again, the include here, we saw that it could be include before the body, and that's referring to here. This is where it's going to be included. If we say include after the body, it's going to be included in this section here. And if we say include in header, it's going to be included here, even before beginning the document. So let's go back. So for packages, usually it's all included before in the header itself. So we're gonna include in header. And there's different file, like you can either do it as a text, like just adding these packages, or you can provide a file. We're gonna go through the two since we're gonna keep populating this. And once we feel like, yeah, that's too much, let's move it to a file and clean things up. So what I'm gonna do here, there's the text function that, or the text metadata that, yes, I'm gonna read text here. And we add a stick, or I don't know what this is called. Devin, help me if you know the name of this one.
It's a pipe.
And pipe, yes, a pipe. So we use a pipe here. That what pipes mean that everything underneath it should be a text. So we do a tab as well. It's this is the required. So I'm gonna use a package called layer source page, which is the recommended package to modify the header and the footer for CommaScript. There is other, like you can use, for example, this is like the package name, and these are the package options. Again, there's different packages, but I'm gonna share with you as well the documentation for this package. I know LaTeX documentation tend to be very painful to read, but it does have a curve, but afterward it's going to be really useful. So I'm going to use this package here, and I'm just going to add a few examples on how we can like adding the header and footer. So I'm just going to paste for time and just go over quickly what we are referring here to. So we use the package here in header, and again, we know that LaTeX do have the concept of packages, and you can use different packages here. And now inside this, there's a page style, and this is macro related to this package, that there is something called a CR heading, and this is a type of header and footer that inside this package. And okay, about left in the odd head, the left side, the odd number of those, the odd number of the head, I want it to be R in Pharma 203. You can really add whatever you want here and write it down. And the right side, the header, and it's also on the odd pages, I want to be write the quarter report, and the foot to be, or at least the odd foot to be R in Pharma again. And I foot here mean it's all pages as well. I want it to be the page, which means the page number. And this is also a LaTeX function. Let's render this now. Let's look at what we will get after we adding all these text here. And now it's generating the bibliography, running the LaTeX again. And we can see that there's no figure, there's no headers or tables anywhere. But this is the report template, because it doesn't care about the title page, the table of contents, and the first page of each chapter. It doesn't include the header or footer, and that's the default. It only included that in different pages, and you can see we do have that RN Pharma and quarter report and the page number. But how about, no, I want to include that more. I want to include it in also in the chapter style, I wanted to include, in the each chapter. So we can add another function here, and we call it, it's called, it's a new command, or renew the command, and change the chapter page style. So usually it do have a default, but in LaTeX, if you want to change the default, you want to keep it as this one. So you render, and it's generating the bibliography again. And we can see it's also included that, and even like table of contents, figures. but we don't want it to be in the title page as well. But you can do that as well. Instead of chapter, you can say title page as well, so you can include it. But usually it's a good practice not to put it on the title page, unless that the company or the university or your thesis requires that, then yeah, you probably want to add that as well. Okay. So we talked about the including in header, how we can include that as well, what we can include in header, how we can add header and footers, and we talked about the text here. There's other thing that, okay, how can I modify the source report or the document class that is provided by the Quarto? I don't want this title slide, like even if I write author name, like author equal, like, yeah, I'm gonna say my name. And then if I render, it's then running, generating bibliography. And you can see it doesn't look nice. I just wanted like to have, for example, a more structured title page. So this will bring us to a concept called partials. I don't want to modify the whole thing in the Quarto document or the Quarto default that generate LaTeX. I just want to modify few steps there or few chunks there that will at least serve my needs in terms of customizing the report. So there's something called article templates. Let's go, let me bring this here, and it's called template partial, and this will not replacing the like at least the whole entire template that gives you, and we are replacing just a partial of it. And we are interested, like there is HTML partial, Reveal.js partials, but we are interested in LaTeX partials here. And you can see there's different names, and these names should be preserved. Like if you want to modify any of those templates, it should be kept the same, and you shouldn't modify the name of it. And there's like what we would be interested in before body.text, because this implements the front matter and title page. And this is the one we would be interested in modifying that one. So before that, let's look at the template one or the default one, how that will look like. Now they provide here in the Quarto docs, they provide the source code. So if we click on the source code here, it takes us to where the Quarto have the Pandoc templates for it. And we are interested in before body. Actually, we can look at a different one. Like for example, before body do have some of this LaTeX functions and LaTeX syntax here, and we can, like for example, look at one. Yeah.
Hey, good.
Let me exit.
Okay. I think that's Wednesday. Okay. And we can look at a different one, for example, title.text, and see how that is oriented. And these the template partials or the Quarto templates that used to generate the PDF. So again, let's take this body.text, let's copy all this, go back to our studio files, and let's create a blank file. Let's call it before body. Yeah. Before body.text. And we should again keep the same name as the one requested here. Like it's called before body.text, and we call it before body.text. Let's paste what we copied from the GitHub here. We copied this and we save it. Now let's go back to the report, and we can add these partial here. For example, let's go underneath the section and call it template. Template, there's two, like if you want to modify all the template, all whatever inside the Quarto, and you want to have the full control over the Pandoc template and Quarto template, you can do that. You can specify the template and add that as a text file, or as again, if you want just a chunks of those, change a chunk of those defaults, you can use template partials. And it takes an element as a list. So we can say before body dot take. So now we do have before body.take, and we didn't change it anything. We just copied the same one, and let's render it. I just want to show you, like, if we render the add the template partials and the before body.take that contains all these information, how it will look like. So nothing changed really about the title page or anything. So this is where we come in and we change stuff. Since I'm gonna use a heavy LaTeX stuff, I'm gonna copy it and just go quickly over it, but you will have this code available in GitHub after the workshop. So what I'm gonna copy is something prepared, and we usually use something similar here at Gilead in pharmacometrics group. Let me just pull that out. Copy and paste it. And please don't be scared about this. So, okay. Here it's all LaTeX syntax. It's nothing unusual. It's all, again, we saw this before, this page style. Since if I removed all the default for before the body or for the title page, I need to specify that, yes, I keep this empty. If I don't keep it empty, it's going to have also the header and footer. Those are just a LaTeX syntax that, yes, skip two centimeters and keep going. And we will have, like, I'm adding our Pharma report and just a table. I'm creating a table here that we will see how that will look like. And I'm just adding a Gilead address here and nothing else. Actually, I don't want to copy this now. Just let me cut this. We can talk about it in a bit. So yes, we do have the report, nothing else. I just want to save it and we can go talk about it in a bit. So let's render this. It's already in the before the body.take, as you see here. But before that, actually, we are using a package called TabularX. TabularX is also a nice package in LaTeX that will modify tables for you, and it does have a lot of functionality. Where we can add this, again, it's the same way we are adding here in text. We can add, we can go back and add that in the inside the QMD file by just appending it here. Use package TabularX. So now we are adding the package TabularX. The nice thing, if you don't have this in your local computer or your HPC, if you have a text live or tiny text, it's going to be automatically pulled down from the something like the CRAN for our packages. It's called CTAN for LaTeX packages. Stand for CTAN. Okay, let's render this and see how things will look like. So again, you are seeing a rendering, generating bibliography, render again. And here we go. We do have, we get rid of the title page. We have a new thing going on here that we do have the table that contains the information. For example, what is the report number, report title. Usually this is like this report, you use it in pharmacometrics and clinical pharmacology to send it as an external report for agency. And what is the drug name, the indication for the disease for that. There's a study numbers, the clinical trials that goes on, and so on. And those can be filled out. Like we can fill these out in a bit. I'm just gonna show you, like, for example, if we go back before body here and report number here, I'm just hiding it in dollar signs. What means here that you can add a YAML or a YAML metadata and the YAML header something called report. Let me copy this, or I'm just gonna write it here. I'm gonna say report called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is represent the report number. And whatever the report number you have, you can add it there. And if we render this, we can see that the report number will be appearing here. The same thing for reviewed by or approved by or the report date. All those can be assigned. And if you want additional stuff, and I'm gonna show you for example, the copyright. How can I add that? We talked about the title, drug name, disease, and I just want to show you, okay, before I go into the copyright, I want to show you how about if I have a multiple authors, how that can be done here. So if we add here, like not only me, I'm gonna add it like this as a list, and then I'm gonna add Devin as well. Now save it, render it. And we can see that, okay, now it's prepared by me and Devin here. Now you can also modify this. You can modify how the, like if you want all the authors beside each other, not underneath each other, you can go back to before body here. And this is also a LaTeX syntax. And I'm just separating them with a new line. But if you can add and here, it should be giving you like, or give you like side by side, not underneath each other. And same for review or approve. It's going to be the same syntax here, where you add the reviewer, you can add the approval for this document and the date, and you can just really like think about what's your needs. You can add it within $sign in the before the body, or at least for this template here for the title page, whatever your needs is, you can add it within $signs, go back to the report.qmd and add it here as to refer to that. Other thing I want to add here, how about if I want to include here that this is copyright or a confidential document, since it does have $1 million research in it, so I want to add it as a confidential document. The thing I copied before here, I'm just gonna move it, copy it again and move it back to this before body here and paste it. So we can see like I'm skipping just for cosmetic changes. I'm just centering and I want copyright. And again, see, you look here at a copyright and I'm using it like whatever I'm writing in the YAML header, it should be pasted inside this chunk here. I'm using another package from LaTeX called MD Frame. That's will put it as a nice framed view. There's a lot of different packages that can get you there. For my personal, at least, usage, I like this one. So we can just add that package as well. And again, I told you, this is gonna get ugly where if you keep writing like the packages, and that's I'm going to show you in a bit how we can put all this in a file and render it in the same way. So MD framed, hopefully I didn't have a typo in it, but let's run. Oh, sorry.
And Mutaz, for the sake of time, maybe it would be worth jumping towards showcasing what that collection towards the end is, as we're kind of coming up on the break time.
Oh, yes, sorry. Okay. So you mean the extensions or?
Yeah, pulling it, consolidating it.
Okay. So again, we created this for sake of the time, as Devin mentioned. Let's see how we can create an extension that we put out the document, and then you can send it out to your colleagues, to people that can be using it. So the Quarto, you probably want to open the terminal for that one, and hopefully Positive people will do it automatically and different. Hopefully, they will do it in different releases. So if you can, you do Quarto, create extension, and there's different type of extension. But for this one, we're gonna use something called extension journal. And we can create the extension name, let's call it report 1. And now it's gonna create another RStudio for me that will pull out, hopefully. It should be out soon. Yeah, here it is. So it's created for me this file or RStudio project that it do have contained the template.qmd here, that it's just the generic template, and it do have like bibliography and the extensions here. Let's look at the extension file, and this is where it's important, so we can copy paste from what we did from the previous one. So the extension YAML is like served as the global YAML for that for your report or your extension. You do like what is the Quarto required, and this is reads whatever you have in your device. So I'm probably gonna reduce it to 3. For me it's 1.4, but usually now more people have 1.3 in there. And I don't, since this is in PDF, I don't want the HTML to be there. I don't have any filters, and that's what Devin will talk more about it. And yeah, since common is usually cool when you have a different formats, but since this is just a PDF, I'm just gonna keep the PDF here. I can pull out from what we have been written in the YAML file at least and pull it down there. So I'm just gonna copy a few stuff from here. Copy it, and we can paste it here. Okay, just let me do this. Hopefully this, oh no. I think this should be, yeah. So include in header, remember what the ugly stuff we did before when we wrote down all these in text. So I can copy all of it, copy it, and go to the, since include in header, there's a file here. And it's same way, like we can do it as a text or a file. And we go to header.text and just we paste all this information here, just for sake of cleaning. Let me do shift down. Yep. So we save this here. So we do have the header now. We have the extension, what we need for that for the report. So we can write the report here. And those are probably the important thing, at least for the extension. Otherwise, you can change the go back to the report here. There is the template.qmd, and let's delete all this. I don't need that. And also, I'm not interested in the format. I'm just gonna keep here the bibliography. For us, it's we used a different bibliography since we're referencing like the base R package. So I can copy it and paste it here. So this is like the easiest way. Like if you have a citation, you can want to add it, you can copy paste it, or you can insert it. It's very flexible to add all these information. So we have the report 1 template, we have the format report 1, but we forgot about the partials, because if we go back here, we have before body.text. I like to keep those clean, and for example, I'm going to add partials. Hopefully partials. Okay, and then I'm going to create a folder here called partials. Put it okay, and then create a new file, text file, call it before body .text. Okay, and then we just paste whatever we wrote down from the previous one here. And we paste it here. So we do have this now. We do have the extension ready, and we do have, let me just quickly check if I forget to move anything else from there. Just quickly. Yeah, it's all should be there. So let's go back to the template QMD here, and let's add just a quick section here, summary. Actually, no, I just want to copy everything we did there. Just let me open that one so we can at least see if we can replicate that report. Sorry, I'm taking time now, but it's worth it, really. Okay, let's render this. It's rendering, it's going through that. So now, again, here we get the template that we asked for, and this is as an extension. And we do have everything in it, and you can modify as much as you need, but you can, the thing here that you can, where is it here, report one, this can, like, you can push it to GitHub, and then you can use it. You can use it simply. So I did upload different, previously I uploaded one document there. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna say Quarto use template, and I'm gonna put my GitHub account and the report, whatever the repo name. So it's gonna be the same structure as you are seeing here: extension, bibliography, README, and all of that. You push it to GitHub in a repository, and if, for example, other people want to use it, you give them, like, yeah, just run this Quarto use template, use template, and your name here, my name. Do you trust the author of this template? I don't trust myself, but I'm gonna say yes. And the directory name, for example, I'm gonna create this so it's not going. I'm gonna create an empty called foo, and I'm gonna say foo. And now if we open foo here, we can see we do have the extension, the foo, and if we render this, and this is like a I did this previously. It's the same functionality, same way of it, how to generate these, or at least bundle these reports in an extension so other people can use it. And if we look at the files here, foo.pdf, we get that all what we needed. And yeah, tables, summary, it's all, and the same thing. Probably I didn't have to cover the glossaries, but Devin will touch base on it in his next extension. I'm sorry I took more time, but there's much more, but we can share the repository and all the, like, for example, the copyright, all this information, and then if you have any question, you can create an issue or start a discussion there, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it. Devin, is there any time, or is there any question? Let me look at the chat box.
I think what we can do is, while there are any questions, let's take a 5-minute break. So at 3:08 Eastern, we will reconvene for the next section. Awesome. All right. So a question came in right before the break around, what exactly are these Quarto extensions a little bit? And to kind of go straight to the source, straight to the website to show you what this is this idea of being able to modify Quarto's behavior to add functionality or include and bundle together certain things that you want to distribute. So in Mutaz's example, one of the great things that you can use an extension for is for distributing templates. So if you have a report template that you'd like to be able to either distribute or just kind of be able to replicate over and over without like copying and pasting an entire report and jettisoning it. And so if this is an area that you're interested to kind of figure out how to dip your toes in the water for how I get this out to other people, Quarto extensions are a fantastic way to build something up, do it by hand as Mutaz showed, but then ultimately know that there's a way of hiding a lot of that behavior from the users, where some of it you can hard code, if you will, but other pieces you can do like he showed, where you can expose it through variables that are exposed in like the YAML header. Or in a variables file, so you can control some elements, but make it flexible in other ways for your kind of users or your colleagues to use. Now, as you can see here, there are various types of extensions that I would suggest you go check out. I can't remember exactly who, maybe it was Anne, was asking about presentations. Like there are a huge amount of extensions, particularly targeting Reveal.js for presentations in particular. And there are things for reports and otherwise. Now, extensions, this behavioral modification and bundling is not just about LaTeX. It's not just about PDF. You actually have a significant amount of control to what exactly behaviorally is going to go on between Quarto running your code, collecting those results, and then ultimately like in between that and the final output format. And so I want to show kind of two things to demonstrate the kind of power of extensions that may be relevant to some of the folks on this call. And so one of them, for example, if I kind of pull this over, is one of the things that we are developing is a GXP compliant cloud platform for using our studio and scaling it out to use some ClinFarm specific software and, to use R and Python at scale. And one of the things that comes along with these compliant platforms are tests. There are test cases, there are, automated tests, but there's a lot of manual procedures that clients want to see. And so one of the cases that we had to deal with was the fact that there were a bunch of different stakeholders with different contexts around what they would need to see. There is like a tester that is going to need to run particular tests. There might be someone that needs to review, like, are the outputs correct? There are all sorts of different pieces to going through the act of like validating or qualifying a system. And so the idea that we had was to say, well, rather than needing to make documents designed for these different stakeholders and the different contexts, what if we could use Quarto, where we could have this centralized document and this document style that we could take advantage of, where the output would be able to be kind of used in these various scenarios. And to show what this, like an example of what this kind of looks like. And for the sake of time, I'm going to really hand wave myself. So this is really for inspiration, not about exactly showing the implementation. But what we have is we have something that looks like this. Here's a bunch of test procedures that we've developed. Inside of these procedures, you see things like what is the procedure, what are the steps. If you actually expand it out, you see screenshots that show what you needed to do. You also see, notes of things like expected outputs. So there are steps to perform, but also certain screenshots correspond to expectations of it should look like a particular thing, and it's important to call that out. Now, this is one lens from which to see it, but we also need, when you're actually performing these tests, like a separate body of information that is provided to a QA tester that, kind of run these procedures and then fill in your version of the outputs kind of thing. This is something that we looked to Quarto and we were able to solve through Quarto because of the fact that Quarto allows you to modify that behavior. So again, very hand wavy for the sake of time, but if this is something that you are involved with in any way, shape, or form, please shoot me an email to follow up if this is something you'd love to discuss, what you're doing at your organization, and maybe be able to kind of collaborate in some way, shape, or form. In this case, what we have is we have these kind of mega documents that the idea that we came up with was using those divs, using these ideas to be able to define some of our own custom syntax, like a step, or whether it was a screenshot that was meaningful to capture, or just something that we wanted to be an instruction for someone to perform. So taking this information, what we're able to do is we were able to write a Quarto extension, a Lua filter in this case, that goes through this master document and modifies the output to actually kick out different copies of this document for different stakeholders. So for the kind of reference article, what we have is we have the document that you're showing. So this is like if someone wants to understand about a particular procedure, they can go read this. But then we actually generate individual like test example invocations so that those can be checked into a Git repository and used by the actual QA tester for a particular set of tests that we kind of wrap up and bundle up so we can generate other outputs. Now, I very much can empathize and appreciate that a lot of people have very particular contexts from which tests need to be designed, they need to be invoked, where evidence is put, but this is one of the things that at least these types of extensions with the ability to modify structure on the fly, including things like generating new docs. So if I kind of pull this back, like you can actually, take content and then write them out to other files. And by doing that, you're able to at least start to have a conversation of how could we start to programmatically pay down some of the burden for activities that traditionally have been extremely tedious to perform. So validation being one of them. However, there's lots of other report writing and updates and other things that can kind of also fall in that class, depending on what your job is. And so this is something that we're working on actively. So if this is something that you're interested in, please let me know. Now, with this shown, the example that I want to kind of demonstrate and to go into a little bit further right now is an example kind of tied to PDFs. And also tied to the fact that though some of you may have looked and said, that is all well and good, it was great to see this PDF report writing workflow, but at the end of the day, our company uses Word. So if the output is not Word, like this is great, but I can't use it. Very much understand that. And so let's look at where the overall literate programming ecosystem starts to show some rough edges. And so in this case, one of the reasons that things like PDFs are so popular is because of the fact that that underlying capacity to take advantage of all LaTeX gives you a lot out of the box that you don't have to do yourself. So one example of this is within LaTeX using the GLS functionality. So this GLS functionality is a way of being able to write terms where you have like a kind of an abbreviation and terminology associated with that. And if we look at the kind of rendered preview here, where'd you go? Try to open this back up. There we go. I want to call something out so you can kind of see the direction that this is going. We have in the raw Quarto document, we see GLS Atom data sets were used, then we use GLS Atom again, and then use another one, BSA. These terms are managed in an abbreviations file that says like Atom represents analysis data model, BSA, body surface area, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that LaTeX gives you, which is pretty impressive, is the fact that it will go through there when the document is getting rendered to PDF, and it will replace these. It will replace these where the first incantation in a document gets replaced with the entire term, as well as the abbreviation in parentheses. And then subsequently, it will just use that abbreviation. And so this is something that if you are writing reports, you get for free with LaTeX. So this looks great. Now let's go, oh, you know what? I heard that Quarto can kind of render anything to anything else. So let me try to render this, for example, to HTML. So if I render this to HTML and we take a look at this, whoa, where'd everything go? Not only is it not there, not being translated like /GLS Atom, it's literally just gone. So where did this go? The answer is that when Quarto and Pandoc Pandoc gets to a section where it is definitively tied to a particular output format, in this case, LaTeX, and you're asking to go to a different one, it will drop that information. And so these are called inline LaTeX invocations. And so when Quarto gets to that, if you render this to HTML, if you render this to Word, it will literally just drop this. So GLS is awesome for PDFs, but something that's very much a showstopper if you want any other format. So the idea, the thing that I want to showcase right now is to delve into the question of, well, what if we wanted to be able to have this same functionality, but to take advantage of it through us being able to use Word or HTML. And so this case of us saying we want to have functionality, we want to be able to add a couple things. So if we kind of look back at this, two things show up. One, we get all those replacements. Two, we get this section called terms and abbreviations. Three, if we look at the actual abbreviations kind of master list, we notice that there are a number of them that we don't use. And so in the document itself, when it's actually rendered, it only keeps the ones that are present. So in the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to hopefully demonstrate to you with much speed and brevity how you could build an extension to accomplish this natively in Quarto. So we are able to take advantage of this in Word and HTML. Question is, do Word extensions, our Quarto extensions, excuse me, can they only be written in Lua? The answer is no, they can be written in pretty much any language. With respect to Pandoc does have the construct of being able to interact through JSON. And so as long as you're able to manipulate JSON, you can do stuff, but it is trickier. To say the least. So there are a number of extensions floating around in the discussion forum, as well as Pandoc's discussion forum, particularly, for example, using Python. So it is possible. However, Lua is the thing that is both natively built into Pandoc and the most performant in Pandoc. However, and also Quarto gives you some kind of like niceties built into Lua that you can take advantage of as well. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this document. I'm going to rename this GLS example filtered. GLS example filtered. And we're going to clear out some of this PDF stuff to start. Boom, boom. Oops, I copied and pasted a little too much. So we're going to clear out some of this. And this is where we're going to start, right? We have our section. We talk about this GLS atom, blah, blah, blah. And so we also have some duplication right here. All right, so let's preview this again as HTML. And what we see popped up is, I hope this HTML preview is okay. We see that GLS atom is gone, et cetera, et cetera. So to add a filter to Quarto, so we can start playing around with this, I'm gonna move this down here real quick so we can shift around the UI a little bit to give us some more screen real estate. Boom, boom. All right. What we're going to do is we are going to add a filters file called gls.lua. In here, we're going to start to add some Lua code. We come back to our Quarto document and we just say filters and we give it the path. So filters gls.lua. All right. So we have now set up a filter that does precisely nothing. And so if we were to kind of re-preview this document, and it kind of comes back up like literally nothing's happening right now. That is completely okay. So what I want to show is how we start to tackle this. So we tackle this through the construct of interacting with the pandoc abstract syntax tree in the filters. And so what this looks like is I can actually show you this by saying Quarto render GLS example filtered to native. And so if I open this native file to start, what we can see is this is what between markdown and getting to that final output, this is what pandoc sees behind the scenes. This is what pandoc translates, I should say, the markdown into. So you can see here, it notices things like we have a header 2 called with the term next section. Then you have a paragraph. And here is where we are able to start dialing in to what we can target. Here is our raw inline tech that has the term GLS atom in it, then a space, and then the string data sets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what pandoc sees, right? And as I mentioned, when you go to formats that are like specific, if you go to a different one, like Word or HTML, this gets tossed out. So what we need to do is go in here and grab this and manipulate it. So that's what we're going to do in this Lua filter. So what we can do in this filter is we can say function, and then this is where we define the type, the type of element that we want to target on that abstract syntax tree. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of some of the stuff that Quarto gives us. In particular, Quarto gives us on this Quarto object some stuff. In particular, one of the things that it gives you is the ability to log output. And so I can say hello here, but the real thing here is I'm going to put this in and we're going to just log whatever the value of this element is, or I can call it element instead of R. And so now if I go in and I run this Quarto render GLS example filtered QMD, what we're going to see in the terminal, I scroll this up, is you see that pandoc started, it grabbed some metadata, and then as it went through that abstract syntax tree, it landed on each one of these, GLS atom, GLS BSA, and it just printed them out. That's it right now. So all we're doing is we're grabbing this AST element and we're printing it out. Now, if you feel like you've just been like dropped into the middle of the ocean and are going, what the heck is going on here? There are a couple areas on the Quarto website that talk about this a little bit. So I'm kind of having to jump right in the middle and for the sake of time, but do note that there is a little bit of information talking about this. So in this case, like the Quarto log output, this is something that it is demonstrated. I will confess, though, that the documentation overarchingly compared to other portions of Quarto or our ecosystem is very much limited. So this is kind of, you know, you're in adventure mode a little bit right now when you're messing with these Lua filters. The fantastic thing is the community continues to make more and more of them. And so one area that you can get a lot of help is literally just by looking at filters or extensions that do the things that you kind of want and look how they were implemented. That's where you can pick up a lot of patterns for someone that's just, you know, a little further in their Quarto and pandoc Lua filter journey to figure out what's going on. So I have this raw inline, and now we need to do stuff to it. So what I want to do is I want to be able to say, okay, let's take a look if this thing begins with GLS, and if so, grab it out and then replace it with something else. And so, you know, if let's go like this, we're going to say local text equals that element dot text. And if the text sub is the first 4 letters are equal to GLS, then we want to do something. We want to say we're going to figure out the replacement by extracting out, and GitHub Copilot is helping me here, by extracting out the GLS entry and getting these parentheses are showing, it's saying match inside of that and grab the contents of this. This is just like using regular expressions. If you go into the Pandoc documentation that talks about what kind of string manipulation you can do, this is the type of thing that falls out. So if I was doing this from scratch, this is where I would be looking for, like, how do I ultimately think about the fact that I have a term like, you know, /GLS BSA. I ultimately want to get this out some way, shape, or form, right? I could strip out /GLS this and then strip off that, or this is a good case for like using regexes, and this is what that is. So we grab the replacement and we say, if this actually has value, then let's just log some output, and we're going to say we found a replacement. Fun fact about Lua is to combine two strings, you use ... instead of like a plus. That threw me for a loop for a while. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return a Pandoc string of the replacement. Not that I want to shill for things like GitHub Copilot too much, but I will absolutely say that VS Code plus GitHub Copilot are now Posit Workbench. The latest version with Copilot is immensely helpful for trying to navigate some of this Lua stuff. So we have this replacement. Now let's close this out. We come back here and we preview this, and suddenly, bam, we're a little bit back in business. Now at least we have Atom data sets, Atom again, and then BSA. So we've got that basic replacement in place. And so we kind of look here on the output as well. Let's see, did that pop up when we rendered it? It's in a different terminal. So if I like render it here, shaboom, found replacement, BSA. Okay, we're in business a little bit. So we now need to figure out about how, like, this is not just what we want. We want the first one to say like analysis data model, parentheses, Atom, and parentheses. So in order to do that, we're going to need to handle getting and looking up this information. And so once again, this may be an area that even 6 months ago, you said, is this something that I can even tackle? I don't even know where to start, what to do, how to begin. And so, processing this file is one thing. I'll actually show you the solution that we came up with. But whenever I'm developing this type of extension or otherwise, the first thing that I want to do is like hard code some stuff just to allow for viability. And so in this case, I'm not even going to worry yet about figuring out how to parse the abbreviations text. Instead, I'm just going to build something up by hand. So what we can do is build an acronym table. And tables in Lua that have keys and values will look something like this. And in this case, since I have this floating around in my example documents, Copilot is already on the case for me. But in reality, the very first time I had to type this out kind of by hand. So I typed this out, took me a couple minutes, but bam, you have this acronym table. And so now we can start to refer to this acronym table. So our code that we have here in this raw inline can get a little bit more sophisticated. In particular, what we want to do is we want to be able to look up what the replacement should be. We also want to figure out if it's the first time or a subsequent time. So I'm going to make another table called scene acronyms. The scene acronyms and the acronym table combined are going to allow us to have the lookup table as well as to keep track of what's going on. Now, I'm being very cognizant of time. So instead of typing this out, I'm actually just going to copy and paste the solution and wave my hands at this, and we'll go through it very briefly. So boom, I just typed out a bunch of stuff, flashed across your eyes. Let's look. We still have that same matching part, right? We get the replacement, but now what we're going to do is we're going to look to see if there's an expansion, right? The acronym table, the replacement. So in this case, it would like pull out Adam, and it would look this up in the acronym table. So this value for expansion is going to be like analysis data model. So then we're going to do a check. We're going to say, okay, if this actually a real value, and we have not seen it before by trying to look this up, right? If it's the first time, it won't be present yet. Then we're going to mark that we have seen it. And then we're going to, instead of returning the replacement value itself, we're going to do that append doc string with expansion ... parenthesis, replacement, closing parenthesis. Otherwise, we're just going to return the replacement itself. So like Adam. So if we add this to the mix, we use our kind of hard-coded acronym table, it renders, and boom, we've now got analysis data model, and we say like referred to Adam. So we have now in 15 lines of code been able to kind of implement part of the core functionality that made kind of LaTeX so special. And this now works everywhere. It works in LaTeX, it works in Word, it works in HTML, et cetera, because ultimately what we're doing is we're replacing these values kind of inline before it gets to that content rendering. So we're part of the way there. Right. So the next thing that we have to do, though, is we have a couple more things in comparison to what this PDF looks like. Right. We need this terms and abbreviations area as well. And so we have the lookup. We have the fact that we can grab this information. We know what we've seen. So we could figure out which ones we need to refer to, but we have to figure out some way of getting it into the document contents. And ideally, we would also like to be able to parse out this abbreviations table. And so the first thing that I want to show is how the heck do we tackle something like this abbreviations table? I myself had, when I started this kind of extension journey a number of months ago, had never written a line of Lua in my life. And still am, very much just kind of poke around where needed. And so this is where actually I can use this as an example to demonstrate the power of, AI, of how for some of these types of activities can be very powerful. I know for some people in a business context, their companies are very concerned around the use of things like ChatGPT. However, if you do have an opportunity, because things like this where you can kind of interact in generalized senses, where you're not sending actual real stuff associated with projects or data for the company, but kind of genericized things, maybe hopefully you are able to use this a little bit. And so to show you exactly actually how I tried to tackle this is I asked ChatGPT, provide me a Lua script, parse this thing, and I need a table structure where I can get the acronym and that lookup value. And if you're familiar with interacting with things like ChatGPT, giving it examples is very helpful. And so it immediately said, sure, if I had this, I could use this code and print some stuff out for you. And so this is where ChatGPT and I started having a conversation, right? Update this code to instead read from a file. And said, of course, happy to do so. And so this type of interaction allowed me to iterate through the Lua code to get us to the point that we need. Which if I go grab this, I will go grab the next snippet of code, which is approximately this with some very light modifications. We go grab this, we paste it, and let's take a look. Maybe take a look. Yes, okay. So this is pretty much exactly what we had before from like a raw inline perspective, except the difference now is instead of having this local kind of handcrafted acronym table, we instead now have a little bit of extra parsing code. We have a little file reader function. We have this abbreviation file, which, as Mutaz showed, you might actually in real life want to shift this up to something that someone could give you a custom file path in the YAML header. We pull this in and then we parse it out. And it's using just that same pattern of using regular expressions to grab out the pieces that we need and build up that acronym table by hand, or programmatically, not by hand. So when we actually Quarto render this, you're going to get to the same place that you did previously. The difference is now we have this flexible acronym table. So we've got our Lua code. We're up to 40 or 61 lines of code. We now are able to pull in acronym tables. We're able to parse them out, do the replacements in HTML. We have one last thing to do before we run out of time today, which is we got to get that terms and abbreviations section in place. So the trick here that we're going to take advantage of is that concept of you can declare a div. That div can have like those classes or attributes associated with it. And so what we can do is we can just say, well, wouldn't it be nice if we had a thing called terms and abbreviations? And what I want to do is just like that kind of magical refs thing, we'll do the same thing. And we'll say abbreviations. So this term, like this is just because we chose this. There's no magic. Quarto doesn't understand this at all yet. This is something we have to teach it. And so what we're going to do to actually teach it, again, for the Julia Child style example, I'm going to go in here. We're going to replace this. And we have a couple new concepts to introduce real quick. The first thing is the raw inline is now gone in terms of the way it was previously defined kind of live. Instead, what we have to do is we have to define this in a global return. And so now you say this is like a table, and then you have this raw inline, which is a function. So it's basically I'm taking the exact code we had previously, just moving it into this slightly different syntax. The reason this is needed is that when you have these things defined inline, so like if I used a div, function div something elements, or function raw inline like we had, if we have any of those like we were just using, Quarto is intelligent enough to pick that up, understand what you're asking for, wrap that up for you, and kind of give that to Pandoc. But what we need to happen now is actually we cannot do this in one shot anymore, which is the kind of default behavior, right? If we think about that native AST, what's happening is we need to go through this whole AST once and find all of these terms first and actually capture them. Then we need to go back, go iterate through the AST again after we have that information and find this section and drop it into that section. Okay, so we need to move from a one-shot thing to actually being able to do things sequentially. And that's what doing this syntax allows you to do. In particular, when you give this table, each section of this is run end to end before the next section. So I could add like some raw inline stuff. I could add other functions here, another div parser or something. But ultimately, in this filter itself, we're saying first run the raw inline in the first pass, but then we're going to do a second pass. And in this second pass is where, to me, the magic all came together. Magic part one. We're going to go through all these divs, and we're going to say, hey, does a div class include dot abbreviations? So there is our abbreviations div target. Yes, it does. Okay, great. Let us go grab all of our scene acronyms. Let's sort them. And this is the last bit of magic that, to me, truly, when I kind of tried this, I just kind of sat back in my chair and was like, oh my gosh, I'm amazed that this works. Because when I did this, I got to this point. I said, uh-oh, The problem that we're going to still face is we have to turn these things into a table of some sort or values of some sort that are going to be specific to these different formats. I do not want to spend a whole bunch of time writing raw HTML and raw LaTeX and raw, open XML for Word. Like that would really stink. What can we do? And here's the magic. Inside of Lua, you can actually call pandoc again to parse a given type of input and turn it into a pandoc AST. So the magic is building a markdown table is not so hard, right? For those of you that are not aware, like a markdown table essentially is like pipe separated, it looks like this. Thank you, Copilot, for even helping me talk through this, right? Like this is a markdown table. And so the idea that we had was to say, well, what if we build a markdown table? We give it to pandoc, let it turn that into the pandoc AST, and then return that. Because if we return that, then pandoc will automatically populate that table into the format that we need. So it's kind of a little bit of a hack, but it's something that allows us to try this out very rapidly and see if we can get that cross-format viability. And so, drum roll, if we now run this, what we get is everything. We get our terms and abbreviations, we get a table of terms and abbreviations, we get our section, we get the other piece. If I switch this over and I render this to like docx, and open this puppy, see if I can open this puppy. I get the same thing. So this is to one of the questions earlier on, partially at least addressing that question of there are gaps between what is possible in Word versus possible via PDF and LaTeX. Quarto, to me, is the first opportunity that we've had to really bridge those gaps meaningfully for professional content. And the way through that is through the use of the combination of Quarto's built-in capabilities as well as these extensions that we can customize and do more with. And so before I kind of turn this over to Priyanka to summarize for everyone, right, what we did here, we took the our Quarto documents. We identified the fact that we wanted to manipulate some of the behavior associated with this. We wanted to, find these textual strings and replace them in some way, shape, or form. We also wanted to even collect that information up and be able to like truly add a section that did not previously exist in content. And we did that in something like 90 lines of code. Now, that 90 line of code, I will admit, was multiple days worth of head bashing to figure this out. But you can see that ultimately the code itself stays somewhat brief and ultimately is something that is modifiable and extensible. So I do see one question, Tom, asking about the review cycle with the reviewer using docx and updating it. Yes, we've thought about that a lot. In fact, because the way that we do project works, we generally deploy teams of multiple people. We usually have like a medical writer, a data analyst, a pharmacometrician, someone senior reviewing this. And so we worked very hard to make Quarto work end to end. The challenges were the fact that clients of ours frequently wanted Word documents, and B, the review cycle is difficult. And so we had been using pure PDF for a while, but this piece is a demonstration of the fact that we are ourselves in transition, trying to figure out how we can make Word work. Where one of the concepts that we're actually considering is using Quarto to what we're calling, DraftX. So I think one of the things that is very challenging is figuring out how to get stuff back into Quarto. And so the combination of tools that we may be landing on, again, this is something that we are in progress working on. And so if you're interested to kind of work alongside us, and this is something your company is thinking about, please, again, reach out to me. But we are thinking about saying, where can you take advantage of what ecosystems are good at? And one of the things that we realized is maybe this is not so binary of an answer, at least for now. And so, using more Quarto through templates where you can you have a lot of productivity early on, or for very standardized reports. However, recognizing that Word for highly collaborative activities is still valuable. And so how the heck do we deal with the QC process for, values and tables and figures and some of those other pieces? And so some answer may be some combination of Officer and JavaScript and Lua and something else. I genuinely do not have this is this amazing workflow that we're super thrilled with. But we're thinking about it a lot, and we would love to think about it with people because together everyone kind of thinks better. So with that, I will we'll give kind of like a 1 or 2 minute break, at least while we switch screen shares.
And Mutaz, I think this was dense material already being covered. So I would hope not to, get into too much details, but, I'm here gonna be covering very typical or lesser spoken use cases that you can solve with Quarto. Whether it is a situation where you were using our Markdown, but we had some hacky solutions to it, or some of the things that were absolutely not doable in the past. So let's get started. All right, so I am Priyanka. I currently work as a lead analyst at OnPoint Insights, and I like to introduce myself as a big fan of our community, R4DS, our ladies, and anything in between. All right, so let's jump in. So the the focus area that I'm going to be talking about today would be discussing lots of basically just highlighting particular use cases where Quarto sort of comes in as a rescuer. But given the time, I'm probably going to focus on only top 2. So in a lot of my past projects, I came across, situations where I had to do, some ad hoc exploratory projects, and I would have to work with my internal teams around it. And then eventually, once we've figured out what is making sense, draw insights out of it, we want to use the same, preferably same, script to share with our with a wider audience, where you basically don't need to discuss all the deep details of the tech stack that you're using and anything around it. So being a lazy person, being a lazy analyst, I didn't want to be able to have to create multiple versions of the same analysis that that I was doing. And obviously, because of several iterations of doing that internally, it was also error prone, and we could miss out on certain things, and which is not an ideal scenario. So we'll see how Quarto, by offering project profiles, overcomes this situation and makes this workflow so much more easier. And I think one of the things that we've all come across from PositConf, and I think I personally am very excited about, is figuring out how can we use Shiny, how can we actually host our Shiny apps interactive document, like Quarto itself, or basically just a serverless deployment is what we're thinking about. And I don't have to specifically go find either I don't have to pay for either an RS Connect or limit my deployments at shinyops.io because of the inherent nature of it. There are other scenarios where some of the nuances of sorry, going back. So the previous Shiny apps case would be is where we would be using the R Shiny live extension. Moving on, there are certain other scenarios, dealing with websites and or someone working through their teaching material. Now, if someone is working with in a scenario where you have lots of markdown files and you have a lot of redundancy in terms of your formatting information, you could use you would be able to use a concept of shared YAML file, which can eliminate a lot of those redundancy and make your workflow a lot more efficient. If you're someone who has a blog or a website which you've been maintaining and setting up your posts on across different years, and you have come to a point where you want to start to categorize it into different collections. There's a concept of listings or custom listings that is available in Quarto and that you can make use of to, again, make it a lot more accessible and manageable for you and for your audience. But like I said, so given the limitation in time, I'm only going to be focusing on the first two scenarios right now. And let's just jump in. So now, so project profiles is a concept where you can define within your Quarto profile, within your Quarto.yaml, or otherwise using external environment variables, you can choose, you could have one or more profiles which allow you to showcase or hide a certain behavior based on the profile that you're running your particular file or your project for. So I will showcase an example of a single file or a multiple file scenario, in case of if you're working on a Quarto website or a book, where you would apparently have several files. You could choose to keep some files for a certain kind of users and showcase maybe all others to a different kind of your audience. So if you're looking at a single file scenario, for example, so let me go ahead and share my RStudio screen. So let's look at a sample example script that I have, and I would not be live coding for, again, so I have the scripts that I would be talking through. So now this is one of the scripts that I created using Pharma Penguins data. This script has, like it says, it is meant for a lot of initial exploratory analysis, and you would see there are several slides or several headings being presented with different ways and means of how we would want to visualize this data to understand what is there in the data. Now, going back to the discussion that I said earlier, now when I'm working with my internal team, I would want to discuss all the sorts of beautiful plots that I've made, all the analysis that I've done, and we could discuss them in detail. So now in this particular scenario, I'm thinking about my audience being either an internal team, or my client, my audience could be external. So now in here, what I could do, I could use, like I said, what is called a project profile. Now, this is an example Quarto document that I've created, right, inside a project. Now, I could define, I could use the keys called when profile is equal to internal here. So what this would do is, when I'm defining my profile to be internal, it is going to run this section until this colon section ends here. If it is not internal, so if I I could call it a client, or I could call it external, or maybe some other words. So as long as it is not matching this particular profile, it is going to only showcase the the previous sections before it. So let's look into how we can achieve this. Now, before we move on, you could also, in your Quarto.yaml file, you could define a default profile by using these keys here. And then you could actually change this by going into your terminal. So again, there are two ways. You could either use the environment variables and modify your profile by that, or you could go ahead and render this particular file with the -- profile key, and then you enter the type of profile you want to run this file for. So let's look at So this is the file I want to render. And the profile I want to run this for is internal. So it is, as usual, running the QMD file, all the chunks that are being read. Now, once that's done, it'll populate the result. Okay. Are you able to see the browser screen?
No, we just see the IDE.
Okay, so I should share everything. Is the browser visible now?
Yeah, we see the plot.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. So now what this brings up is, all the analysis that I have done for the internal clients. This has all the charts and all the analysis that was done. Now, if I were to change this, I would have to modify this one. I'm going to change this to a different profile. So let's check it out. So now what you see here is the only limited portion that was, that was not inside the profile limited part. So here, just by simply using the key combinations of when you want your content to be visible, given the profile situation or the profile conditioning. So this is, you could call this project profiles, and the conditional visibility of the code is basically these two things are what is controlling what is visible to who. And I think this is a very useful use case or scenario that I am now tending to use a lot. Now, in a scenario very similar to this, I want to cover when, if you're working, maybe if you are a educator and you are working on a website where, you want to probably do the similar thing in the sense that you're working with multiple files where you probably have a basic, your book is containing some basic material, and then you want to add a few more chapters to give it to your advanced learners. So, a similar situation can be done. What you would do in that case would be, you are going to go, so for example, I'll go ahead and take a different example here. So this is a bit of a crowdsourced project that I took from what Alan Schussman was doing for one of his notes from PositConf. So in here, I have, a couple of scripts here. Now, in this case, you could see that, you have, you could now create a profile group, right? And you're mentioning whether this is for basic or, whether your profile is for the basic user or an advanced user. And you can, accordingly create different versions of your YAML file. So now in here, for this book, for basic learner, I would like to, I would like them to be able to see only a few chapters, let's say, first 3 chapters. And this is just this is more of a demo example, so I don't have like an entire list of chapters that probably I would want them to look at. But similarly, when I go and look into the advanced, I have all the remaining chapters included as well. So how I would go ahead and render, a project like this. So let me go to the history. So we are inside this project, and I'm gonna go preview this because it's a book, so you have to access it in a different way. So here in this case, I have the preface document, I have the day 1 notes document, and the references. Now, if I do the same thing after changing, move this around. after changing my profile. So this is how it should look like. So we are basically, again, doing a preview here. And now I have all the documents that were, listed in this YAML. So just by changing your YAML and, continuing to create your material as it is in the order that you would want to, you're not, your workflow is not getting interrupted, but just varying the version of your, based on the profiles that you have, for the basic Quarto.YAML, you would create those profile groups, and then you can use that to tell Quarto under the hood which YAML file they should actually be using to progress further. All right, so moving on. The next example is, I guess it's something of interest to a lot of people. And unfortunately, I think before the presentation, I had to uninstall my Shiny Live package. So I don't think I'll be able to successfully run it, but we'll try. So, but I'll go through the steps first because this is a bit of a long process. So to be able to, run a serverless Shiny app or Shiny in a browser where, you're able to manipulate everything and also be able to share this with your colleagues, you have to follow, you have to use an extension called Shiny Live, and also in addition, a package called our Shiny Live package. So we'll start with installing, and this package is available on GitHub. We could, simply install it using DevTools install _ GitHub function, or you could also use the other methodology, which is by installing pack, and, pack function does the same thing when you give it the location where the function, where the package exists. Now, once you have our package installed, you want to start with a new Quarto project. And you can do that by by using your terminal and calling Quarto create project. We would go with default to begin with, and then you just want to rename. When it prompts you for the directory name, you want to give it a particular name that you want to use for that project name. Now, once that once that project gets created, you would see this whole, you'd see a new directory being created, and the entire sort of basic structure gets created where you would have your initial QMD files and, all the required material. So you want to start with that rough template. And then you edit, you want to make sure that your Quarto.YAML file has the correct name that matches with your project name. Then you go ahead and click in the terminal to install the Quarto extension. You can do that by using Quarto add command. Now, Quarto -ext is the location of where you have to find it, and then you give it the name. Now, once this step is done and you've successfully done your setup, now you're ready to actually start working with the Shiny code. But I guess just a caveat that at this point, you could probably just play around with limited functionality apps, because Quarto can only Quarto is not able to handle the Shiny apps with code spread around. Just one, I guess one, or app.r or UI.r and server.r is what it's able to handle. But the current example that we're working on, this is in fact the one which is in where we're putting the code inside the code chunk in your Quarto document. So for that, what we would begin to do is we would have to add a filter key. I think this is, again, filters is something Devin talked about earlier. So I'm just gonna continue with the usage of this particular filter. So now the Shiny Live is the extension that we just downloaded in our, as a code, one of the code extensions that we have added. So we have to now ensure that it is put it into your YAML, so that, and you would do that with a key called filters, so that it is able to read that code under the hood. Now, after you've added the key, you want to make sure you add the code inside your code in a code chunk. But if you have to specifically make sure that the code chunk isn't going to be the typical R code chunk that we usually work with. It has to be called shiny live -R. And another important thing here is to know that you have to call it as a standalone. You have to set standalone setting to be true. And what that means is you are telling you're telling Quarto that this particular app, all the code that you want to write for your UI and server function is going to be treated standalone, and it's going to work within this document. So again, just to reiterate, you want to make sure your filter is mentioned. You want to make sure the code chunk type is of shiny live -R, and your code chunk option of standalone true has been set correctly. So practically speaking, once that is done, there are no issues, no errors. You are ready to render your document. You could do that either with the render button, or you could go to the command line or terminal to type Quarto preview, followed by the name of the Quarto file that contains the shiny code, with these switches of no browser, no watch inputs. And then once all of that looks good, you are ready to publish. Now, there are lots of publishing options available, but I think GitHub pages and Quarto Pub seems to be the most popular ones right now. And I think with that, yeah, that's all. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Devin. Did you want to wrap things up?
Yeah. So, I know for those in Europe, thank you for sticking around so late. For those of you on the East Coast, little time to check some last emails before the day is done. And for those on the West Coast, hopefully you are invigorated and excited from all of this learning, and we'll spend the rest of the day, of course, experimenting and playing around with Quarto. I'll at least stick around for a couple of minutes if we just want to, I'll call it like open the floor up for people that want to discuss or debate or anything of the like. But, thank you all for coming out. We will get this material all kind of aggregated and then over to the R and Pharma organizers so they can send out a blast material. It'll be a couple like repository links where you can see all of the code, play around with it yourself. And then I believe, as Harvey mentioned at the beginning, in a month or so, the recordings will be out so you can go listen again some other time.
I got it.
That's a really great session, and I'm also very excited about Quarto. So I've been doing mostly Quarto and outputting into slides. It was kind of fun, and HTML. But with PDF, as I mentioned in the chat, I still kind of struggle. I don't know, like my R Markdown just renders just fine, but not R Quarto.
Yeah, I think, Anna, you're running this on your Windows laptop.
Yep.
In a corporate environment.
Right.
Yeah. So the trick that I see is that is github.com blocked for you?
Well, you mean like going
if you go to your
online?
browser, like if you go to your browser, github.com.
No, I can go and
you can go.
Yeah.
Okay. So almost certainly you have an issue where your IT admins have been muddling with your system. The reason I'm reasonably confident of that is actually when you ran that Quarto Tools check, you see error sending request to the TinyTech API, couldn't connect, So
unknown issue.
Yeah. Now that in and of itself is not a problem, right? The interesting thing is because you mentioned that your R Markdown does render, like it indicates that you have an appropriate tool chain if your R Markdown can render to PDF. I did want to make sure, like, have you rendered R Markdown to PDF?
I just did it. Yeah.
And that worked fine.
Yes.
Great. So the good thing is that they are using consistent tool chains under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
So Quarto, in theory, should not need anything different than what R Markdown needs. What I'm not certain of is that, like, where is the signal getting crossed? Because what I think is happening is when you run that Quarto tools check, if you run it in like an environment that API.GitHub is not blocked or the cert error is not a problem, it says you two things. It says this is what's on your system, and should you update or not? Like, here's the current latest release. So clearly that like fetch for what is the latest release is failing. So because of that, it's erroring out before it tells us about what it understands on your system. So that's why it's like slightly challenging to diagnose.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where do you go from there is the next question.
Well, I'll probably could start with our IT and who is doing some admin stuff.
Maybe. One of the other things you could do is instead of clicking render, in RStudio itself, can you open up a terminal and manually type Quarto render -- 2 = PDF?
Oh, you mean in the console?
Mm-hmm.
You said? Just do Quarto.
Probably in the terminal, not the console.
Yeah, not the R console, but the terminal.
Well, I'll try doing that just in the terminal. I just don't want to take time doing it right now from everybody, but I'll try that.
Okay.